All right, welcome back to another episode of Tax Pros Unplugged. We're going to try again because sometimes recording is fun and we have tech issues. So here we go. Today we're going to talk about short-term rentals and self-rentals, which are a couple legal loopholes that exist in the tax code for rental properties and positions where they might become not passive. So if you're in real estate, you understand that a lot of times we get locked up with some passive income issues, and that prevents us from taking losses, particularly for a high income earner. But there's a few loopholes that are totally legal and work, and we're going to talk about them at length. But as a reminder, this is not personalized tax advice for you. You should get your own personalized professional guidance from a qualified professional. We are going to give you some hot topics, though, to talk about and hopefully take back to your tax pro and ask the questions about how you can unlock some losses, which is what we're trying to find, right? It's what we do. I mean, we do taxes, but believe it or not, we don't actually like paying them or having our clients pay them because, like I always say, I think you're a better steward of your money than the government. So, yeah, I don't know. How about you, Jared? Do you like to pay taxes?
No, and absolutely not. We're actively trying to find a way legally to keep more of my money in my pocket without giving it to a government that literally isn't open right now.
Right.
That, still wants my payments, though. They're still collecting those, but they're currently not working. Well, Kelly, I want to throw something at you if you're okay with me starting us out here.
Go for it.
You and I both have a W-2. I have a rental. Yep, I have a rental. You have a rental. Mm-hmm. Your rental somehow offsets your income. Mine does not. How in the world does that happen? First of all, this is the question we get all the time. My buddy who works at the same job, right, has the same W-2, makes the same pay, has the same amount of kids, is married, but their tax situation is different. How do they end up getting $7,000 more a year than I do? Okay, so our rentals, why are they so different? Why does yours offset my income and mine doesn't?
Good question. Yeah, so in my case, as you mentioned, yes, I have a W-2 because I am an owner in an S corporation, and that company, which I own, TBS, also in a separate legal entity, though, I have bought a piece of commercial property in which my business operates out of. And I'm the tenant in that business. And so because of material participation and what is the word I'm looking for? Common ownership or whatever, basically my losses in my rental property offset my income because I have chosen to elect grouping for a self-rental.
Okay.
Super fun.
So you're saying that I've just got a regular traditional rental, just random people living in my house, in this house that I own. It's passive income. So the idea here is you want non-passive income to offset non-passive income or earned income. Yes. So we're specifically talking about short-term rentals and self-rentals. The scenario that you just described was a self-rental. Mm-hmm. So there is a way with rentals to write off income is what we're getting at here, which is a good deal as long as we meet the criteria to be able to do so. So I think that's the gist of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, and I think, remember, because a lot of people think, well, rentals are always good deductions, and they can be and usually are. And I have lots of people that have lots of rental properties. But there's this really annoying rule that if you earn over $150,000 a year, those rental losses, unless you meet a whole bunch more categories, basically go away. And that's really what we're talking about. So when we talk about this, we're talking about individuals who are, earning in some other capacity between taxpayer spouse over $150,000. And that's really where this becomes so special. If you are under that limit, this is less of a strategy for you because you're probably going to be able to take and offset those rental losses on your personal tax return.
So let's talk about it this way. What is so different? We've said short-term rentals. We talked about self-rentals. We've at least listed those out. What's the roadmap of what's the difference? How do we get to a short-term rental? How do we get to a self-rental?
Yeah, so let's define the two big kind of caveats here, what we're talking about. So short-term rentals are, common now. We call them Airbnbs, and we use that. I think it's funny when we say things now, it's kind of like Kleenex is, everybody calls a tissue a Kleenex. The
Mm-hmm.
brand has become an Airbnb, but I'm not just talking about that you have to have a rental property on Airbnb. It could be VRBO. It could be just, rented at a vacation community. But generally speaking, we're talking about these short stays at properties, which commonly we now know them as Airbnb style, properties, not what we would consider long-term rental properties where, I have one tenant, they just pay me, they have a year or two lease and they pay me once a month, that kind of a thing. We're talking about these short-term rental properties where generally, and what we're really trying to get to is that average stay of the person is under 7 days. And so we're looking for short term, usually again, these week long vacation style rental or weekend style rental properties. And then self rental is just kind of what it says. It's a property that I own that I rent to myself. And again, we have to be sure that we do that right because there's a lot of people that I see that do it wrong. But we have some legal issues, I think, that get overlooked when we get into self rentals. But it's a property in which I own a business, and look, I've been paying a lease to my landlord at my old property for 20 years, and we were blessed enough to find a property that we could buy and now lease essentially from ourselves, and so that has some huge tax implications, though, in the positive.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I see, at least I'm going to speak from the perspective of tax pros, and I feel like I throw this in every session that I'm in, or not every session, but pretty close to every session that I'm in, whether we're talking about different types of tax, whether it be self-employment tax or NIT or anything like this. The common misconception that I get from tax pros all the time, and it's everywhere. It's across the country. I like asking the question, when I say Airbnb or VRBO, you as the tax pro, where do you put this on the tax return? And there's this huge disposition out there, and you can speak to this too if you've seen the same thing. But as soon as I say Airbnb and VRBO, they're like, well, that's a Schedule C, earned income. They just automatically think it's there. And please let me say it this way. I don't like using the word ignorance, but because it has a negative connotation to it. But that choice or that thought process is coming from a place of ignorance because we just don't know what the rules are. So there's a difference between a traditional rental and a short-term rental that is still on a Schedule E, which is still on a passive income form, but is non-passive. So have you seen this across the country when you're talking about this? Is tax pros just assume as soon as they hear those letters or the names of those companies, they're thinking, oh, that's a Schedule C.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think that there's a couple people out there that speak about this at high levels. I would like to think us included, but there's a lot of really great tax pros that talk specifically about real estate and these differences. So if you're getting higher quality education, you are understanding what these nuanced differences are. But yeah, if you're just somebody who's like, I've never had this before, and you see one come in, I've seen it. I think the other reason that I always try to look for the why. Why would somebody think, oh, I own a rental property, but it should go on a Schedule C? Is that they also mistakenly think that they cannot take advantage of, we don't love to quote, I don't love to quote code section, but code section 199, where they can get the QBI. And so for some reason they're thinking, oh, well, this feels a little bit more active and I want them to get QBI. And so I have to then put it on a Schedule C. And that's, again, just kind of a misunderstanding of how the tax code works. So when it comes to short-term rentals, if this is a world that you're in, or if you're considering getting into this world, again, this is where a quality tax pro coming alongside you and understand and explaining the differences and how to thread that needle. Because this is not just one of those things where you're like, yeah, I own an Airbnb and, I rent it out to my cousin for 6 months of the year, and then I do a little bit of something on the weekends, and you're not going to meet all these tests. And so there are some pretty specific things. I looked into the history of this. This really comes back to, and I don't know if we should say this, but a lot of ignorance on the part of the IRS is that the tax code sort of didn't anticipate or didn't know about Airbnbs. because they weren't around even 10
there's
years
not
ago.
one mention in tax code. And we
Right.
got 70 something thousand pages of tax code, right?
Yeah.
There's not one mention as of currently, as well, last year probably. I haven't looked at it since, but there's not one mention of short term rentals in tax code anywhere. But we have court cases that have that led us to look at these through a different lens, which is good. It's set a precedence. And I keep looking at these short-term rentals. Now, these are very, very popular, and everybody talks about them on social media, right?
Everybody.
But your average taxpayer, when they go hear this on social media, they're like, as soon as they hear rental, they just assume it's a normal rental and they stop listening. And they're like, they come into my office like, well, I've got this rental that should offset all this income. There's very specific like code sections and very specific rules for these. If you jump through the hoops and actually do this, this is a great way to make money that's non-passive. Like the income is, if you have a profit, it's a good deal to make this income rather than, it's better than your W-2
Yeah.
from a tax perspective. And if you have losses, this is better than, it's just like owning a business where you have these losses, you don't have limitations on it like you would with a normal rental. There is no downside to this. I mean, from an income or loss standpoint, and even if you sell this, there's some preferential treatment for that. Like if you were to sell a regular rental, that's subject to other taxes as well, compared to this short-term rental is not subject to NIT and not considered passive for all these other taxes. There is no downside to these short-term rentals, at least in my opinion. You just got to know the rules and how to get there. So let's speak to the rules. We did talk about it. It has to be 7 days or less. That's that's the stay of the tenant. And then the other thing the criteria that you've got to meet with this is material and active participation. And we call that code section 469. That's not important for anybody to remember, but other than tax pros, right? And the key thing is a lot of times what the part of that code section everybody uses is that the owner of that is participating 100 or more hours per year and is significantly more activity than anybody else, including non-owners. So the general down and dirty of this is if you own this short-term rental, your average tenant stay is 7 days or less, and you're actively participating more than anybody else in this activity, you're doing stuff inside the activity or the business, you have a short-term rental. So I don't know, Kelly, if you want to talk, we've got the same type of rules for self-rentals when it comes to activity and 469, but there is no like timetable the tenants have to be there with self-rentals. So let's,
Right.
I mean, what do you think is probably one of the biggest myths that we find with short-term rentals or even self-rentals?
Well, I think that the short-term rental certainly at this point gets a lot more popularity from, like you said, social media. And let's unpack why that is. Okay, so what we're getting at is we're trying to talk technically about all these different things you have to do. But what we're trying to accomplish for the most part is individuals, generally speaking, have a high income somewhere. Okay, and there are people who are like, oh, yeah, I want to do this because I want to write off my taxes. And then I look at their tax return. I'm like, well, sir, I mean, you paid $1,200 last year in total taxes. Like zero means zero. So I can save you $1,200, but like beyond that, we're done. So we're talking generally about people who have some level of high income elsewhere. And if that's the case, they aren't going to meet they're not all in on real estate. And so, we do have something for people who are all in on real estate, who just do real estate, which is called reps, which is real estate professional status. And that's very different as well. So those are individuals who just own and operate real estate. But for everybody else, the social media trigger is like, oh, I'm a doctor and I'm a dentist and I have high income. Yeah. If, from a job, how do I offset? And we always say the W-2 people get crushed. That's the highest, taxes that happen. So this is just one of those ways where if you want to diversify your portfolio, you can do the short-term rental game with one or two properties and make an impact to your bottom line. Now, why do you make an impact? Most of the time it's because you buy an Airbnb and then you cost seg it in the initial year. Again, threading that needle super, tightly and saying, okay, I have high income. I bought an Airbnb. You still have to understand and recognize the potential pitfalls of like, I own a rental property. I might have a mortgage. I have to rent the thing. Like, it's not like you actually have to put the thing up. You have to have cleaners. I mean, it's still it's a viable side hustle, but if you want to do it, there then is where you unlock, because of the depreciation that pulls down that income, forces it into a loss, and can directly offset your W-2. So that's kind of what we're getting at here, is that this is not a strategy for somebody who is not yet earning, I would say,
North of 150.
I mean, to diversify. I don't know where you recommend. I'm generally not thinking under 400
Well,
for short-term rental.
Let me just say it this way, and this is probably a different way of saying what you just said. I get these different people coming in. They're like, hey, we bought a rental this year. And they're thinking, because they're coming in because they bought it for $200,000. They dropped $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 into it. They come in with the predisposition or the forethought that I'm going to be able to write all this off. And their income is north of 150 from their W-2s.
Right.
And then I get to be the one that tells them, no, that's not going to qualify for any of this loss. They're like, what do you mean I don't get any of this loss? Well, you don't lose it. It just goes in this little tax dryer that over here called passive activity losses. You eventually get them either when you sell it or you dispose of that rental, or your income significantly drops, right? So the short-term rental scenario, you're still making the same exact same situation, same building, same everything, same W-2s. Whereas I told the one couple, no, you don't get to take these losses. With a short-term rental, you do. Because you meet these qualifications, you get your 7 days or less on tenant stay. You get these losses to offset that. You're accomplishing what the first couple wanted to do, but you can't do because it's a passive activity in a traditional rental. But yeah, I agree with you from the aspect that somehow we attach ourselves to social media, but it never tells us the true story. Or if it does, we don't hear it all. Because all we heard was, I just need a rental and I need to, sink this money into it, or I need to be actively participating in it. This is where I think that even tax pros can be educating a whole lot more. We've talked about data being so important for business owners, right? If you're doing like your short-term rental and you're self-renting it, meaning you're not self-rental as in tax-wise, but you're managing it on your own. You don't have Airbnb or VRBO. You're required to track what the average tenant stay, or how many tenants you have per year, how long they total stay. If you don't have that data, you're not going to qualify as short-term rental. It's just all there is to it.
Yeah. And then I think the other part we clarify with the self-rental, which is the other one we're talking about, is that here is where I think this is an underutilized tax hack, so to speak. But I think because it's hard and you have to have, again, the right lineup of scenarios to have this happen. And so one, I'll just, like very personally speaking, it is not cheap or easy to own a piece of commercial property that your business is in. Point in case, the massive plumbing issue that just had last weekend. So I just, want to preface that this is, again, not one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, I can save all this money in taxes. Trust me, the headache is painful. But you also have to have the right structure for the self-rental to work, because if you're just a Schedule C, if you're a high-income Schedule C earner, okay, and you then want to buy the building in which you operate, maybe you're in, you have the opportunity to buy a building, it actually doesn't sort of fall into the self-rental. If you're straight Schedule C and what you're thinking is Schedule E, and I see this wrong all the time, it actually becomes one. And so because it's identical common ownership and there's no entity differentiation, you actually put that entire deduction on the Schedule C. You do not separate to a separate Schedule E, which again, a lot of people do wrong. And so
screws it up all the time.
All the time. So this only works when you have entities involved, where again, there's a different way to get around it, because the Schedule C operator, and I think that's really the difference, the Schedule C operator doesn't get to do this self-rental in the same way that we're talking about, where you have this
And the reason for that, if you're a tax pro out there listening, the reason that a set Schedule C cannot do rent or pay themselves rent is because by law, all income or all compensation from the Schedule C to the owner must be subject to self-employment tax. That's the rule.
Yep.
So if you're trying to avoid self-employment tax by throwing this rent out there and trying to make this, you're processing an illegal tax return. So. No, I agree. It's one of those things where you have to have the right structure, and this is where it comes back to. Don't let us try to tell you about self-rentals, and it applies across the board for everybody. I'm Joe. I'm a mechanic. I'm a Schedule C, but I own the building. You're not going to qualify for that unless you've changed your entities to something else. Those being S Corp, partnership, or a C Corp, or something along those lines, which is a creature that I don't know exists. So,
is there a new structure we don't know about?
Well, attorneys create them every day with trust, right?
Well, that's true. Hey, that's right. We could do a whole episode on debunking myths about trusts.
I don't want to. That's like the fast track of getting sued, right? So Jared said on Tax Pros Unplugged that this Keystone family revocable, irrevocable, middle of the road trust that I created that is applicable to state of Ohio law.
Grantor, ungrantor.
That he's the grantor and the trustee and the beneficiary of, that he doesn't have to claim any of his income from this, and he put everything in it.
And he can his house is in it, and he lives there, spendthrift. Just throw words at the wall.
We are 22 minutes in here, and my blood pressure was not up until just now. So, sorry. Let's digress here. Kelly, why don't you talk about some pitfalls when it comes to when you go to your tax pro, if you're an individual out there and you go to your tax pro because you're thinking you have this short-term rental, what are some tax pros or tax preparers, the pitfalls that kind of come from this, that come directly from the mouths of the pros?
Well, I think you mentioned the one, which is that there is a misunderstanding by some that short-term rentals, because there is some level of active participation, that income should then be on a Schedule C and subject to self-employment tax. And that, generally speaking, is incorrect. There would be some cases where short-term rentals might end up on a Schedule C, but for the most part, in the scenarios we're talking about, where we've got some of the high income earner and just owns one or two maybe rental properties, doing some material participation, but again, not the full-time job, that is going on a Schedule E and is, then though not subject to passive activity losses, like you mentioned. What did you call it? A dryer? Like a dryer on the side? Yeah. You have these weird, I have some weird ones too, but.
I got a weird tax vernacular. It's okay. It just comes back for, like you put something in a dryer, it doesn't come out until you go get it. And the door's locked until you do these things,
I see. Yeah, so you have to explain those things to me. I actually take my stuff out of the dryer and then I just usually leave it on the counter in the laundry room. And my husband, loves to find that, and sometimes he'll fold it for me because he's great.
That's the real reason it just gets left on the counter. And his keys are under it or something, or lunch is under there. He's like, well, I got to fold this now because I got to get to those things. So passive aggressive.
Yeah, so I think that's the big thing that I see is the misclassification there, and then understanding what non-passive and passive rules look like, because I actually see sometimes Schedule E short-term rentals, they're on the Schedule E, but they weren't marked non-passive.
Yeah.
And so then the losses are still getting locked up. And again, that's just a misunderstanding of the strategy and, the representation of the rental. So it's actually too conservative a position. And, we're not somebody who wants to get people in trouble, but we also don't want to overpay the IRS. I mean, they take charitable contributions if you really want to give them more of your money, but right. I don't want to overgive them my money.
Well, I just want to speak to this from this aspect, because I've got a mentorship program that I kind of talk to some tax pros, and there's one individual that we were working through a short-term rental, and her software doesn't match. Like, there was no button, there was no way for her to tell her software that this was a short-term rental. The code was appropriate, but then there was no way for her to point out to her software that we meet 469, this material participation. So it was still keeping everything on a passive activity. So we contacted the software company, and the software company says, "Oh, just mark the box real estate professional." And I said, "No, don't do that, because then you're putting this taxpayer in a very compromising position when we tell the IRS that this person is a real estate professional, because they're not. They don't meet the rules for it. But the software had limitations. The other thing that I find in pitfalls is, we haven't spoke to this yet. The only time that a short-term rental would ever go on a Schedule C is if we were offering substantial services. And I don't know if this is a good segue or not, but the one thing that I find with other tax pros when I teach this is what a substantial service is subjective. Like, I'm going to ask you, because you're in Pennsylvania, I'm in Ohio, in literally the middle of Ohio, where we have no bodies of water that's actually significant other than like rivers. But would you consider, if at an Airbnb, let's say I owned the Airbnb and you rented it and it was from me and it was 7 days or less, if I offered to let you use my pontoon boat because it's on the lake, would you consider that a substantial service?
No.
I wouldn't think so too. And here's the thing I kind of get at. Like, I use the example of Wisconsin. Wisconsin, there's a lake town. So literally, if you were getting your car, you stayed at the Airbnb, it would take you probably 45 minutes to an hour to get to a restaurant to eat.
Right.
Whereas if you're at that lake house, it takes you 15 minutes by pontoon.
Right.
Or by boat. I don't want to limit it to just pontoon, but that's a popular boat there. My point
You
here
like
is
the pontoon, don't you?
I don't like boats. It's like, to me, it's like mulch, man. I hate mulch too, because no matter what you do, you got to put more down. And the boats are like, hey, I get to use this for like 7 seconds during the year because we live in northeast part of the country. And then we're like, oh, so we gotta do that every year. We gotta winterize it every year. It's when we get like 15 minutes on the boat, and we're like, okay, kids, sorry, it's snowing now. Now we got to go back to the docks and pull this thing out, and Dad's got to put it on the trailer, pull it to the trailer, back to the house, store it back in the barn, winterize it, make sure it's cleaned up, put the cover on it. Anyways.
So you don't own a boat, Jared?
No, I don't own a boat. I've thought this through. I don't want a boat.
Clearly.
But, if you're in somewhere like that where it's reasonable and customary to do this. But the problem with tax pros is we're sitting in this desk. We're not thinking about where this Airbnb is. We're not thinking that if you own something in the mountains, it makes a lot of sense that you have to have this UTV or this ATV or this Jeep or something like that to get around. Tax pros are real good at where we're sitting a lot of times, right? So sometimes we don't think this is reasonable or customary. And I use the two words, I don't know what words you use, convenience or customary. If it's for the convenience of the tenant, if we can say it's for the convenience, it's probably going to rise to the level of being something that would be a substantial service. If it's customary, meaning you would expect that as a tenant going in to stay at this place, then it's not going to rise to the level of something that would be a substantial service.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's also, even just the basic levels of like cleaning is that, I would hope if you own a short-term rental, between guests, you will do cleaning.
I expect that.
Okay, right. I expect that. That is very normal between guests. What I don't expect when I go to short-term rental is I do not expect a maid coming in daily and turning down my bed and putting chocolates on my pillow. I've never had that happen, by the way. But, that is not something that I would expect when you walk into that. So even there, where there's this misunderstanding of, oh, well, I clean. Cleaning is substantial services. No. Cleaning is normal to clean between guests. Turning down the bed every day and putting chocolates and, full like cleaning of the property and having a, maid on site and a butler and all of that. I mean, if you live that world, like take me with you. You're in a different world where, somebody's opening the door for you.
Well, have you heard let me say, I'm not going to say their name. I've heard instructors when they talk about this say that having Wi-Fi at the location is going to constitute that being a significant service. And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? It's 2025. Like 20 years ago, having Wi-Fi was like, whoa, you know what I mean? But it's 2025.
Yeah.
Having Wi-Fi is like having running water at this point.
I was going to say, yeah. I mean, if you don't have Wi-Fi in your offices, people are like, giving you a hard time. I mean, yeah, I
You don't
completely
believe me?
agree.
Go
Like,
turn the Wi-Fi off and let your kids say, "Where's the internet? What happened to my stuff?" You know what I mean?
I do.
You have college age people. You turn the Wi-Fi off and see how long it takes them to find out.
If the Netflix password resets, they're texting me. Okay. I mean, yeah,
Yes.
like, trust me.
That's another one. Like people are offering like satellite TV and subscriptions for like streaming, and they're like, "Well, that's a substantial service. I wouldn't expect that." So, I mean, you're telling me that if you went to a regular rental, that you wouldn't have the ability for internet or TV? You're telling me that that's the trigger for you to turn this into a Schedule C? That's just insane.
Yeah, completely insane. Because when we Airbnb, we tend to go to like more, isolated places where there would be no actual internet, like cellular service. And that's by design. But the Wi-Fi is in the property, and then I got a smart TV and I can log into whatever. And yeah, I mean, it's just that's a no-brainer. That's not substantial service to have those kinds of things. And I mean, look at it from the lens of to have Wi-Fi does not require me to like substantially show up on the property to be like actively working, right? So back to like, if the butler's not opening the door for you, I mean, having Wi-Fi is just like having soap by the sink, right? I mean, that's the standard.
I don't know why I thought of it, but I was like, the owner's coming and riding a bike to power the electric the whole time, so you can keep using the. Anyways, sorry.
There you go.
That would be a significant service.
I feel like that would, yeah. Mm-hmm. You should get some time. If only we could write off time, though, for all the time that you'd be spending on your bike.
Yeah. Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to just throw out here, and it's kind of adjacent, but there are a lot of people go out and get these short-term rentals or these destination rentals that are thinking in their heads like, me, my family, everybody can use this property, and we can still rent it out and we can still write it all off.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to talk about, at least from the idea of what's the time frame. That's still allowed, but we have a time frame for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when we get into like short term, what the term is generally now is like vacation rentals, right? Because that's generally what's happening here. You cannot, as the owner, spend more than 14 days personally at this property, right? And now there is some wiggle there, though. And I think this is important, again, because we have to understand this is where good books and records win the day. We don't want you to get in trouble, but also if you're working on the property and improving it, renovating it, that is not a personal day. If you're there, I mean, which is justifiable. So a lot of times you'll see somebody like, hey, I bought a cabin in the woods. I got to go, work a weekend and fix the thing up. Those are not going to be personal days. That's like the vacation period time. Do you agree? You got to keep good records.
I want to throw the caveat out there, though. It shouldn't take you 2 weeks to replace a toilet. Like, meaning if you're going to go do this, great, but have a reason, have a defendable position to say, I replaced the toilet while I was there. I did some plumbing work on the shower. I put in a new hot water heater. I replaced a couple windows. Like there's going to be a justification there for the time frame. If you don't want to count X amount of days as towards your personal use, then you've got to be able to justify saying it would take this long for me to do this anywhere else.
Right.
So I agree
had
with
one
you.
last year that had a hurricane, like at a short-term rental. And I mean, obviously it was like they were down there, because they were super, they come in and they're like, oh my gosh, I spent so many more days there. I'm like, yeah, but you were cleaning up from a hurricane.
I agree. I'm saying like, okay, let me say it this way. Maybe my clients are different, but they're like, well, I went down there and I, had to change the furnace filter. So I stayed 4 days. I'm like, no, man, I get it. Like you can get a day out of that. Okay. It's one of those things where it's like, hey, you give enough leash that they want to hang themselves.
Right.
and you just got to be careful. What I'm saying here is have a defendable position to say, I'm going down here for this purpose, and it's going to qualify for so many days. If you got to replace the roof and you're doing it, and I will say this too, Kelly, like if I were to go down and replace the roof, if I'm going to do it myself, I'm not a contractor. I'm not a carpenter. I'm not one of those guys. It might take me a week to do that. Whereas some other people that do this for a living, they'd go down for a day and a half and they got it done.
Are you climbing on the roof, Jared?
No, gravity affects me differently than everybody else. You know, when you have as much acreage as I do, you know, I'm pretty sure that my gravitational pull with the Earth's gravitational pull are like magnets. We speed up and we go faster than other people do. You know, like the bowling ball and the feather type situation. No, I do not like heights. I do not like being on the roof. That is not my thing. But you get my point here, though, right?
Totally.
Like,
I just wondered if you were up on the roof changing the roof.
The roof doesn't want. Okay, I went to Africa on a mission trip one time.
I hang you out like that. Like I walk you down that plank, and then I know it's going to happen.
It's going to trigger something. So I was on a mission trip in Africa, and we were building a church out in the middle of the bush. And they put me on the roof. Now, I was about 40, 50 pounds lighter then. But the wood there in Africa is wet, so they don't dry it. They don't kiln it like we do here in America. So I'm literally on the peak of the roof, scooting myself forward, trying to put stuff up there. And it went, I'm like, this is where Jared dies. They're going to have to figure out how to get Jared's body from Africa, from Kenya, back to Ohio somehow, because they put the fattest guy on the roof. What were they thinking?
I feel like somebody wasn't using good context clues.
Like it didn't even require anything but eyes. Like you just looked around them like, nope, yep, nope, not him, definitely not him. Stupid. That was dumb. Oh my God, we got to digress here. We got to move forward.
Okay.
Self-deprecation ending.
I'm also not getting on a roof in case you were confused. Under zero circumstances.
Yeah, can I change the oil? Yes. Do I want to? No. Can I do things around the house? Yes. Do I want to? No. So it just comes back down to it. Like you own self-rentals. I own self-rentals. I don't have any desire to go out and get a short-term rental. It's because let me say it this way. With my self-rentals, I've got staff in all those. Like there's somebody there that I trust every day. If this needs replaced or fixed or whatnot, then we get it fixed. You know what I mean? The short-term rentals of these destination things, and I would say that there are a bunch of people who love real estate and they love getting different varieties of real estate. The idea, and some people can swallow this pill better than I can, the idea of being able to have all these different places that I might have to be to go to do something or organize is just a nightmare to me. And dealing with, this is also another thing, dealing with technology where they're emailing or using this portal or something through Airbnb to text me or send me a message.
I think you have to look at, whether you have to look at whether the tax benefits of this are worth your sanity, because it's not. And I think that's where social media gets us a little bit, hot. Everybody's like, oh, you just go buy a self-rental or a short-term rental. This fixes the problem. That is not how this works. And either of these, owning a piece of property in any way, shape, or form, if you own a house, you know how, difficult that can be. You are owning a piece of real estate. So don't always let the tax benefit be the only thing that, sort of don't let the tax tail wag the dog. I mean, that is not the only reason to do it, is just for the tax write-off. Understand what comes with it. And, because it's time, it's energy. It can be great, but you definitely have to understand what you're getting into. And I don't think enough people talk about that. They just say, hey, or I don't know, maybe some of them have I swear maybe they're brokers for Airbnb or something. Like they've got to be getting a kick. So they're just out talking about how you should buy self-rentals left and right. Or short-term rentals.
It's like going on and having a kid for the $2,000 child tax credit. There's way more involved in that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, ooh, sounds like a great idea. I get that $2,000 plus, I get head of household, whatever, if I'm single. But then, oh, by the way, you have to take this kid home, and then you have to take care of the kid, and you have to do all these things and feed them, and make sure they get to school on time. And then, God forbid, you sleep in one time. But anyways.
There's a kid sitting on your head telling you to wake up, Dad, right?
I've waved one of my little monsters off. She come in here trying with her tablet, like, this movie's over, Dad. What am I supposed to do now? And I'm like, ugh. So, anyways, sorry. I'm just, you were talking about, hey, it sounds great. This is why we want to do this. And it is a good deal tax wise.
Yep.
But you're right. Getting into this, if you're prepared for having these rentals, great. Knowing what type of rental you want. Because I literally had this conversation just the other day with a taxpayer who bought something at a destination location in Ohio. They thought, we want this short-term rental. They didn't understand what they needed or why they wanted it, but they just heard about it. So educating them and say, okay, to have this bona fide short-term rental, you've got to do 7 days or less. You got to materially or actively participate in this. And then you've got to keep good records for all of this at the average stay. For the most part, that's still a little more work than it would be for a long-term tenant. Like for a long-term tenant, you sign one lease. Yes, you're still going to potentially have repairs and whatnot, but the frequency of people, the tenants would go in. You're going to have some good tenants. You're going to have some terrible tenants. You're going to have some middle of the road. You don't know what's going to happen to these Airbnbs or these short-term rentals in the time frame that these people are staying there. Maybe the frequency of your repairs goes up. I don't know. I don't know if there's data out there that suggests that from a maintenance standpoint, a long-term rental versus a short-term rental has more maintenance. I have no idea. I don't know if anybody's done that study.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think that's probably, and I think even with just some of, Airbnb, VRBOs, all those kind of things, they, again, that's why I caution, like that's more of an investment decision for your household because there is a very real risk that you will not rent it. I mean, I had a friend that had this. She bought a short-term rental in Florida and, kind of bought it when the market was very hot and in the middle of COVID, everybody was going to Florida. And then honestly, it dried up. And so the amount of individuals that was going to the property just by having it normally marketed, she went from full capacity, every week to once a month. Well,
Right.
That's very hard to stomach when you're also in Florida. You've had 2 hurricanes and the insurance comes in and is 4 times higher annually to insure this property. And now you don't have renters. So again, there's benefits, but with
Nuance.
every pro, there is a con. And the con is that you have to make sure that that property is actually going to be actively rented, which is definitely harder than a residential rental where you can get one tenant and they're there for a
20
year.
years. Yeah. Wholeheartedly agree. One thing I will say, there's also really no losing with self rentals either, because you're related parties, you control both sides. The beautiful thing about self rentals, if you're in the right entity, that's a great way to get money out of the company as long as you're receiving reasonable comp or whatever type of compensation you're supposed to take based on your entity. It's a great way to take money out of a company that would be earned income, whether it's a partnership or an S corp or a C corp, that's going to save you on payroll taxes. And like I said, as long as you're still meeting those other compensation needs, it is a very good deal to be able to take that income out of your company and do it that way.
Yeah.
I
I agree. I think the self rental has a lot of pros. The one thing I'll say, and this is where I do same thing, you see people get these wrong. One, I almost never see self rentals classified correctly. When I see people come in, they're never usually marked. And that doesn't always matter until it does. And so the one thing to remember about the self rental that is very different is that I live on a farm, so I describe it as it lives in its own silo. And so one of the things, it's inside of its own, like it cannot pierce through the walls of that silo. So if you have other rental properties and other rental losses, you can't come through and touch the self rental, and the opposite goes. So if you have other rental income and then you have rental losses in the self rental, you can't come through the walls of the silo. And that one is where you do see some people messing that up. So
this is the very first time that we have switched roles here. I use baby pools and you use farm silos. I use baby pools because it's like you got 2 kids that are not playing well together. They want their own space, right? Your self rentals in this baby pool, your other rentals are in this baby pool, and they can't ever get into each other's pools. And like I said, it's the first time that you usually use kids or babies, and I'm usually like farms or vehicles or anything like that. So it's funny that you said that way because I always use baby pools. They don't play with each other's
I
water.
don't think, I mean,
They're
because I have
segregated.
silos like right outside the window. There are
Yeah,
silos, so it's like the self rental lives inside that silo. You can't come through the walls.
right, right, right. I like it. I'm glad that you said that it was silos. That makes me feel good.
See, we're just full of surprises, Jared.
Yeah, 100%. I would have never guessed that we would have switched on that hard on that.
That's right. I am usually the baby girl, so I'm usually the one talking about babies. But baby pools, okay, sure, different puddles, But I mean, you could still splash with the baby pool.
Yeah,
So
I'm
that
cool with.
silo's impenetrable, man.
I
You're
mean,
not.
silos. I bet my clients would get that a little better
Yeah,
than the baby pools.
yeah.
I'm
You're
switching. I'm
used.
stealing that. I'm
You're
stealing that
switching it.
now.
You're stealing that. Give me
Yeah,
credit.
yeah, yeah. I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna write you a check soon for every time I say the silo for for trademark purposes. So, is there anything else, I guess, that we need to address or talk about? I know we kind of say surface level on some of this. Is there anything that we think that we should say or talk about from your perspective when it comes to self rentals or short term rentals? Like I said, this is not designed for. It's not designed the same way we would teach tax pros. Let's say it
That's right.
that way, because I spent 100 minutes talking about this on a deeper level with tax pros. So
Yeah, I think the thing to take away from short-term and self-rentals is the understanding that they can be very, very powerful from a tax perspective, but you really have to know how to play the game. And where I see a lot of people, and this goes back to probably the broader conversation, which is that tax planning is far more beneficial than tax reacting. And if you're just either on either side of that equation, if you're an individual who wants to get into this, then you need to work alongside with somebody and proactively plan to make sure that you're going to meet all the subsequent tests and have it all structured correctly, and talk with somebody who actually understands or has done this, instead of just like I called, I don't know Bob, but like I called Bob, who has never touched a rental property his entire career, and he told me I could do this. Like, again, you're going to have to vet that you're with the right professional to make sure you get the right advice, and you're going to pay for proactive planning. That is very different than, hey, by the way, I saw something on social media last year and I did it, and you bring it all into your tax pro, and the tax pro is like, I can't fix this for you, because it was already done. That happened last year. So, spend the time and energy if you're looking for this as a big tax unlock, to understand what it does and do it ahead of time. And then if you're a tax pro who loves this concept, dive into deep education. I know you and I, like I said, we'll both talk about it in different various places. There are other great professionals who teach this so wonderfully in depth and understand what you're doing so that you can properly advise your clients and help them, thread that needle correctly, stay out of tax trouble, but also pay less in taxes. Like, it's a best of both worlds.
yeah, I think the only thing I want to add to that is your tax pro may even know how to do this, but the problem is not all softwares are created equal either. You can run into the same situation where I was just talking about the lady that she didn't know 100% how to do this, but we worked through it and we got it figured out. But then her software won't even let her do it.
That's right.
So you've got this all over the place. And I've said this in a lot of places, and I don't like to say this is in a negative connotation, but there's a lot of tax preparers that are slaves to their software. Well, the software let me do it, so it must be right. Or it's not allowing me to do it, so it must be right. It's smarter than me. So that's the other thing. It's really, really hard from this aspect. I would say that there's very few actual tax pros that know how to do this appropriately. And if you're combining it with putting on the tax return properly with code 3 or code 7, whichever we're talking about here, and then actually depreciating them for the right amount of years. And then also,
we didn't even mention that.
didn't even mention it. It's okay. We don't have to. It's all right. We can move on. Doesn't matter. My point is like, there's so many layers to this that you got to know just from putting it on the tax return properly. But then there's the other coupling piece of like, how do we tax plan with this? How do we navigate the waters to try to maximize our dollar here? Maybe there's years where we don't have to do this accelerated depreciation on some of these things. There's years that we don't have to have this big fat loss. Maybe we push some of these repairs off because we don't need it. So the high end level or the high level tax planning, there's a lot of tax pros that don't even know how to do the first start of getting it on the tax return appropriately or accurately, let alone trying to add the second component to it of how do we maximize our dollar with this. There's not a lot of tax pros out there that do this well. And I don't like saying that about our industry. It makes me kind of hurt my heart a little bit. You know what I mean? Because it's like, this is just education. Get educated. So
I agree.
Sorry. So
All
if
right,
you guys,
I'll bring us in for a landing. If you love us or hate us, either one, we would appreciate if you left us a review and let us know what we're doing right, wrong, or indifferent. And find us on a platform. Again, our goal here is to make you, the taxpayer, more informed, and you, the tax pro, more informed about how we can help strategize the crazy world of taxation. And, you know, we talk about baby pools and silos and all the fun things as well.
yeah. Even if it's a car wreck and you just can't look away, it's okay. Download, like, follow. It's fine.
Find us somewhere. All right. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.